Hey everybody, it's your boy Captain Hunter coming at you again. Thank you so much for tuning into the show. Really appreciate it. Before I was doing a lot of videos reacting to different phenomenon, things along those lines. Not phenomenon really, but police interactions, right? Police videos. And I'm still going to be doing those, trying to get back to the policing aspect of it, or at least try to keep a lot of different feet and a lot of different angles. So I talk about a lot of different things as far as developing men, and that's at the top of the screen. If you look to Captain Hunter's podcast on the right hand side, go over to that platform. I talk about a lot about more men's issues, and how we can in this case, if we look at this case, right, make sure that we are not interacting with the police as much. And of course, at the top of the other side there is, on the left side, is my logo for my consulting business, in which I deal with police related issues and soon to be leadership, management, supervisory type of issues and things along those lines. So I'm going to put my credentials on the screen here so you can check them out, so you can see who I am, what I'm about, what I'm doing, and just a little bit about my credentials along the way. So let's get into the video here. So I came across this particular video, or rather this video came across my feed. I was sitting there minding my own business, and I saw this lawyer says, lawyer 10 ways police try to outsmart you. So I thought it would be interesting to watch, but then I said, wait a minute, hold up here. Let's do a reaction video. So I have not seen this reaction. I have not seen this video. So you and I are going to react to it. I'm going to quite sure he's going to go through his 10 ways. I'm going to watch the 10 ways, and then I'll stop and say, what police are actually doing and things along those lines. So again, you can reach out to me for my services. You saw a little bit about who I am, what I am. If you're looking for expert testimony, if you're looking for a consultant, and we can even just have a chat and have a conversation about which way you should go. But they say anything that you've done right for or anything that you've done for 20 years, you become an expert in. And if you have a certain range and depth of knowledge, then you don't give it away for free. So I'm certainly open to consultations, but it's going to cost, right? I couldn't charge when I was a police officer. Now I was going to charge, right? So, but let's have the conversation and let's see where we can go. If you are a lawyer or you are looking for an expert testimony concerning use of force, management, supervisory principles, police procedures, anything along those lines, particularly police related, hit me up and we can make it do what it do, right? So let's get into this.
Hey everybody, Jeff Hampton with the Hampton Law Firm here. And today I want to talk to you about 10 ways the police will try to outsmart you. Now, number one, I want to talk about ways that the police want to talk to you, and they're going to try to see if they can get a confession out of you, even if you've done nothing wrong. The number one way they'll outsmart you is to lie to you. And people don't recognize this, but the police are allowed to lie to you. And when they bring you in for questioning, or they come and show up and start talking to you, it's critical that you recognize they will make up things to try to get you to talk. I wrote down a few examples here to share with you for examples that I've seen with clients that I've represented at the Hampton Law Firm. I've seen officers lie about having evidence against a client. They've told them straight up, I have this evidence against you. I already know that you're guilty. You better talk now or it's going to get worse for you. Number two, I've seen them talk about that they...
So there have been cases of that. There is a number of states, I believe Maryland, Connecticut was looking at passing legislation. Connecticut was looking at passing legislation so you can't lie to juveniles. I'm not in favor of that tactic. I know, and I get pushback about this. I know I get pushback about it, about, how are we supposed to do our job? Cap, why are you standing against this legislation? And yeah, that's unfortunate. So
they promised that they were going to turn the tape off or the video. Let's say they bring him in and they start acting like, hey, listen, man, let's go off the record for a minute. I'm going to turn this off and I just want to ask you a couple questions. We're good to go. Just share with me. Everything's going to go well. Can I tell you right now, it doesn't matter if they have the tape or video on or not. If you say it, they're going to write it down and it can be used against you and it will be listed as an admission and it will come in court. So it's really important you understand that part is absolutely a lie. They'll also...
Okay. Yeah, there's a little bit of truth to that, right? Particularly after you've been read your Miranda rights, everything you say can and will be used against you in the court of law. That goes a part of the Miranda rights. So that really should not be a surprise to anyone.
Claim that the prosecutor will not act so harshly against you if you cooperate with them. Can I tell you, I want you to understand right now, the police have no control over the prosecutor. Prosecutor can do whatever they want, and then by no means are they tied to what a detective might make a request. And quite frankly, that's almost always a lie. They're never going to ask the prosecutor to not go harsh on you and show leniency. The next one is they could.
That's true. Prosecutors do operate their own discretion. They've got their own interests about keeping their job and making whatever amount of convictions or whatever. Sometimes in some jurisdictions, prosecutors are elected. So, yeah, that's true. He's 3 for 3 so far. They will, or the officers may speak on your behalf, particularly if you have a case where maybe you are lesser involved, right? Maybe you and your boys are out joyriding and you didn't know the car was stolen. And they would say, everybody's looking at a certain amount of time, all 2-3 other passengers, whatever, who were in the car, but you really just came from work and you didn't know that the car was stolen, but they asked you to pick you up. But the police may actually talk to the prosecutor on your behalf. Hey, this is a good kid. He really just kind of get caught up. Can you go light or easy on him? That is not necessarily a lie. So let me tell a story about when I was 15 years old. When I was 15, prior to me becoming 15, I can recall that my parents, my best friend's grandmother, all these different, older people would tell us not to get in the car with people who you don't know, even if they're your friends. Don't get in the car when you don't know where they got the car from. Are they licensed to drive? Remember, I'm 14, 15 or whatever. So this is type of information that they were giving me. So now fast forward, I'm 15 years old, I'm working at this grocery store and I'm walking home. I don't know why I didn't take the bus. I don't know what I was thinking about. Anyway, so I'm walking home and my boys pull up and they're in this car. Well, let me rewind again. So sitting in class with these guys, I remember how they would talk about how they would sometimes get in the car or just go joyriding, take their aunt's car, steal a car, and they wouldn't call it stealing, they would just call it joyriding. So, and I kind of remember that. So now I put these two incidents together. I'm 15 years old, walking home from the store after work, and I see my boys pull up, and they're like, "Yo, get in the car. We'll take you home." I'm like, "Nah, I'm good. I kept walking, and they did whatever they did. Now, I know that they didn't get caught at the time, but I don't believe they got caught that time. But I also remember them telling me stories about how they were getting chased by the police. They would just ditch the car and just run and just chase, and they just thought it was a good time or just good fun. Eventually you lose contact with those types of people. But my point in telling that story is talk to your kids when they're young, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, before they hit these vital ages. It's not always a lie that the police won't talk to the prosecutor. And the last point about that is, when your parents are talking to you, listen to them for their wisdom and things along those lines, right? So I was young enough to listen to what they had to say and all that. So let's continue on.
Minimize the seriousness of the crime in order to get you to admit to certain parts of it. I've seen people say this before, especially on violent crimes, where the detective will say, "Look, man, anybody in your situation would have felt the way that you did. It's okay. I understand. I would have felt that way too. I mean, look what they did to you. It was reasonable. In fact, I see cops do this all the time. You did shoot the guy, didn't you? I mean, you were only acting in self-defense, I'm sure. That's what you thought. That's okay. Just tell me. You did it. It's not that big of a deal." And then the guy will say something. Maybe the client will say, "Yeah, I did. You're right. I was acting in self-defense." And now what does the detective write down? That the defendant admitted and confessed to the shooting. So it's important to understand the officer can try to minimize that. Then they can also tell you that they will help you.
Well, that's true as well. That's true.
Or that things will be better for you when you confess. Like they'll make promises. Now, they cannot induce you or put you under duress in the process of doing this, but they can try to make it seem like, "Hey, I'll work out a special deal for you, or we'll work out some result here if you make sure and cooperate with me, or I'll make sure the judge goes light on you." They can't do that. They cannot guarantee that. And very much, if it sounds too good to be true, you can guarantee it is. And the sad thing is, I did a video specifically about false confessions on this. These are exactly the type of strategies that are used by detectives that have been documented to show individuals giving confessions to crimes they did not commit. Okay? They can also threaten to arrest your family or friends if you do not cooperate. I actually saw this happen to a client of mine where he was being questioned about drug activity, and there was somebody else that he had in the car with him. And basically the officer said, hey, listen, one of you is going to jail. If you don't cooperate with me and tell me what's going on, I'm going to arrest your son. He's going to jail tonight. What did my client do? He started talking because he was afraid of the threats about his son being arrested in the car. So that's number one, is
so yeah, they are allowed to use these deceptive tactics. There was a bill that was introduced. I don't think it passed in Connecticut. I got to check on that, but about this whole deceptive types of practices, and particularly with juveniles or threatening to put children into DCF custody if they, or whatever you call it in your state, in all that. So there are some deceptive practices that are used.
Number two, watch out for the trick of intimidation by the officer. I've seen officers do this in questioning, particularly detectives with younger, more naive clients. Let's say you've got somebody who, before they hired us, they went in and maybe they're in their, they're in their teens, their late teens or early 20s. The officer calls them in and claims they believe they were involved in a shooting. And maybe now all of a sudden the defendant is not providing the information quickly enough for the officer. The officer starts getting upset. He gets up, he walks out and he leaves. He begins to, throw his papers around, start making claims that, listen, this night's not going to go well for you if you don't start telling me and, telling me what's going on. They can actually drag out the interview, that process. They could leave somebody sitting in a room for an hour, 2 hours, then come back and begin to question them again. These are techniques of leaving people in an interrogation room, making them wait for long periods of time. That's the kind of stuff that can actually be used as intimidation to wear people down. And many times it's illegal in the way that they use it. So that's number two. Number three is fabricating evidence. Sometimes the police will claim they have evidence against you. They'll start saying, hey, I already have the weapon. Or, hey, we've already got the drugs. Your buddy who's in the car, he already gave it to us. And he told us that you were involved in it. And that's why you'll see officers like to separate people out of a vehicle or separate people out of a residence as quickly as possible and talk to them separately, because they want to be able to talk about things. And many times, yes, tell them that they have evidence that they do not have in order to have someone begin to talk and reveal information that could be used against them for a probable cause warrant. Okay. Now,
that's not always deceptive tactics, those, and it's not always deceptive tactics, and it's an effective tactic, and that's true. And people talk, and they want to save their own skins, and so it is a technique that is used, and we will do that. So he's talking about fabricating evidence. Now, when I think he may talk about this, first time me watching it, when we talk about fabricating evidence, which I'm talking about the creation of DNA evidence or some DNA report or fingerprint report or something like that. That's what I'm thinking about. He may get to that. I don't know.
We start also talking about this is one of the biggest ones I see, is that I've had clients where they end up hiring me later. They went in and spoke to a detective thinking they could talk their way out of it. And what ends up happening? Maybe they didn't even do anything wrong, but the officer claims,
make sure you subscribe to me too. Not just him, but me too.
I have your fingerprints. I've got proof. I've already gone in. We've dusted the entire house. We are arresting you for burglary of a habitation. This is only going to get worse for you if you don't tell us what happened. And there's fingerprints. What are you talking about? You think you've got my fingerprints at the scene? And they never had them. Completely lied about the entire.
Well, again, so these are effective techniques. And if you were there, if you are not there, you have nothing to worry about. And if you were there, then certainly you have something to worry about. That goes same thing for hair follicles, DNA, whatever type of other thing. If you have nothing to worry about, then you have nothing to worry about.
Our situation. Same thing with DNA. There have been instances where people documented where they've been told that their DNA was found on a particular victim or on something, and that was used in a threatening manner to tell them that they better confess or they better provide information about how their DNA could have gotten on this person. And in reality, it didn't exist. There was no DNA. And what does that do? Even if the person doesn't confess, now you have an individual sitting there nervous, scared, not knowing what to say. That can in many ways be used as a way for the officer to try to interpret that they're being evasive or not sharing information. Okay, so
True. Another good handy technique. If you have nothing to worry about, then you have nothing to worry about. If you weren't there, your DNA should not be there, or you should have a viable explanation as to your fingerprints, DNA, hair follicles, other forensic type of evidence would have gotten on the scene.
remember though, here's one example though. I saw someone as a client one time believed that the officer was lying to them. And in reality, the officer wasn't lying to them because they had left abandoned property. They actually left something abandoned long enough for the police to be able to come over and do a search. So there is some case law on point here. If you abandon your property, even temporarily, you've left yourself open for the police to search it. In fact, there was a 1997 Supreme Court case, United States versus Tugwell. The court held that whenever a person leaves their property unattended, they forfeit their privacy protections under the Fourth Amendment. So if you do have anything and you don't want anybody to search it, you don't leave it by itself, not even for a short minute, because as a result of that, the police could come in and do exactly that and do a search and seize anything that they find as a result of that search. Okay, so that's
Yeah, that would come under, if you leave a bag on a train or something like that, they want to make sure that there's no, incendiary type of device that's going to explode and blow up the place or whatever. So, I mean, we can understand that from a public safety, homeland security type of basis. And of course, the police are just going through the bag just to see maybe there's some documentation as to the ownership of the bag. So it's not necessarily for nefarious purposes, but it is allowable for police to come up, do an investigation, try to figure out whose bag it is. Can't see through the bags. We got to open it up. Maybe there's some books and papers and envelopes and mail or something along those lines, medicine that somebody needs to get, and so they're allowed to do that. Yeah, that's not fabricating evidence.
Number 3, fabricating evidence. Number 4, leading questions. This is the one that drives me crazy. I talk to so many people that say, listen, I had a detective call me. I think probably the best thing for me to do is to go in and talk to this detective, and I'm going to explain to him that I'm innocent and I did nothing wrong. I want you to understand, if a detective calls you and invites you in for a conversation, at no time are you going to actually be able to tell your side of the story. The officer is going to interrogate you, to be real clear. And what that means is he's going to ask you a series of leading questions. Yes or no. Isn't it true that you were at this date, you at this location on this date at this time? Well, is that true or not true? I'm already aware of it. I know you were there. Isn't it true? Would it surprise you that such and such told me that you did X or Y? Does that surprise you? Now,
this is not accurate. Actually, it's not 100% accurate. There are officers, there are detectives who are going to, and there's a technique. I'm not going to get into it. He's spilling all the beans. I'm not going to, but there is a technique in which officers will allow you to tell your story uninterrupted. Just okay, tell me what happened. So you can start whatever time you want to whatever time you want to finish. You can ramble on for 20 minutes. Just talk to me. Just tell me what happened. So this is not completely accurate. It is accurate that sometimes different officers will take different techniques, and the interrogation type of technique is maybe appropriate. So let's distinguish, and I know he knows this. I'm not saying he doesn't. Let's distinguish between interrogation and an interview, right? In an interview, it could be a witness interview. Maybe you're a victim interview, right? Where you're talking and talking and talking and giving your side of the story, telling what happened to you. It's just essentially a dialogue for evidentiary collection type of purposes, trying to figure out what happened, who are the players, who was involved, what happened to you, where'd you come from, things along those lines. And interrogation is what he's explaining right here, and that is come in here and let's have a conversation about the bar that was broken into last night, or about the bar fight that you had, or let's have this conversation about that. Now, here's a big key to interrogation, and even if you go in for an interview, right, you start talking, and then you start saying some stuff. And then they say like, okay, you know what? We're going to read you your rights here. That is a big indicator that things are switching. If you walk through the door for an interrogation, and they're not going to tell you it's an interrogation. They just say, we want to have a conversation. Let's have an interview. And they start off with reading your rights. That should be a big indication about what's going on here. And anything you say can and will be used against you in court of law. Some police departments might have a policy that everybody who walks through the investigative doors, the detective doors, whatever they call it, is read their rights. Okay. Understand what you're getting into. And if you were a victim, if you're really a victim, if you have nothing to hide, then you should be able to talk freely. But if you have any type of culpability, any type of responsibility, any blurring of the lines here, then you got to watch out. So it's not always true. This one is a little iffy what he's saying there.
I want you to understand that's an interrogation. That's not an opportunity for you to tell your side of the story. It's an opportunity to make you look guilty. And particularly if it's being recorded, now there's a video and or an officer's word being written down on a police report saying that you didn't give good answers to a question the officer is going to characterize as something simple that an innocent person should have known the answers to. So I want to remind you for a second, it's an interrogation. You have an absolute 100% right to remain silent. Don't open your mouth. Don't try to talk your way out of something. This police officer is very experienced at interrogating people, and you are unevenly matched in that situation. That's the reason why you have a Fifth Amendment right to remain silent, and that's the reason you have a Sixth Amendment right to retain counsel before you get involved in any type of questioning. Okay, number 5, your DNA. Here's another one, especially when they bring people in for questioning. The officers love to offer people like, a drink or food or anything that they can. Back in the old days, they'd offer a cigarette, any way that they could obtain a DNA sample. And many times, instead of going to have to go get a warrant, a search warrant to obtain that DNA, they'll just bring you in and want to have a conversation. And then their whole goal is to be able to take that DNA sample and use it against you. So beware of that as well.
It's a little easier to collect DNA. So that's. And back in the old days, they did it. How old are we going here? Offering cigarettes and stuff, right? So that he's going way, way, way back. But
number 6, your phone. Now here's a big one. The officers want to act like your phone is searchable and that they can just pick up your phone, grab it, and begin to search it and do whatever they want. But your phone is absolutely private. Unless a police officer has a warrant or you have given them consent to allow them to search your phone, they have no right to be able to grab your phone, search through your phone, look through your phone, find anything that's in there, whether it's text messages or anything else, and you have no obligation to share any information on your phone whatsoever. In fact, in the U.S. Supreme Court case of Riley versus California, you'll find that Chief Justice John Roberts specifically wrote for the majority stating such. He says this, quote, "Digital data stored on a cell phone cannot itself be used as a weapon to harm an arresting officer or to effectuate the arrestee's escape." So because there's no immediate need for the officer to search the phone, they've got to have a warrant. There are no exigent circumstances. The officer must obtain a warrant to search your phone. I don't care what the cop says. Okay, so that's number 6. Number 7.
So I wonder how that would be concerning speedy information, exigent circumstances. What he said was essentially true, but I'm wondering how that would be if there's a chance that we need to catch a bomber before they escape. We need to search a phone immediately, or take somebody's fingerprint or hold them up or whatever to save someone else's life. I'm wondering about that. I'm wondering out loud because there is case law in which officers were having conversations back and forth with each other, and because there was a need to public safety type of thing, try to get this gun off the ground. I'll try to find the case if I can find it. Try to locate a gun. That the investigative type of techniques that the officers were using were admissible. So I'll try to, I don't know. I'm wondering out loud about how that would be.
Be careful when the officer claims he has an accomplice confession. Here's a big one. Let's say you were with someone else, and I kind of talked about this a minute ago. Let's say you have an officer who comes in and speaks to your buddy who was in the driver's seat, and maybe you were in the passenger seat. And one of the things I've seen officers do is walk in and say, "Hey, I've already interviewed your buddy. Your buddy's already told me that the drugs, they were yours. And in fact, we found these drugs underneath your seat. So you're kind of good for this. Unless you tell me what was going on with your friend, or unless you confess to what's going on here, I'm going to have to pin this on you." Now notice I combined 2 of those lies. One, he lied about what your so-called buddy said when they didn't have anything from your buddy. And number 2, they claim they found evidence that didn't actually exist under your seat. you understand you're going down a road that no matter what you say, it's going to make you look guilty. That's an example of if they start claiming they have an accomplice confession, the time to fight those claims is not talking to the officer. It's in court with your lawyer. Okay. Now, number 8.
These are techniques. These are techniques.
You always, let me say this, you always have the right to film a police officer. This drives me crazy. I see officers all the time try to tell people you're interfering with public duties. You absolutely, I will arrest you if you continue to film what's going on here at the scene. That is just 100% not true. You are allowed, if you're in a public space or in private property, you can pull out your phone and you can record everything that police officer is doing. The only thing you cannot do is do not encroach upon an officer continuing whatever they're doing with someone else. So including your interaction with the police. You can record everything that the officer's saying to you, what you're saying to the officer. Officers don't like it, and they'll begin to make claims to you like, hey, put that down. You're not allowed to record me. Don't record this interaction. Walk away. You are absolutely not required to do that. And so it's really important. I know people sometimes get arrested for this. They will need a warrant to not only request the video that's on your phone, but they'll also have to have probable cause in order to arrest you for something. And filming an officer is not sufficient to establish probable cause for an arrest. Okay.
So that is true, and that frustrates me as well when the police officers do that. So if you're a police officer, do not do that. Do not approach, threaten to arrest and things like that. If you are a filmer of the police, a video of the police, make sure that you stay the proper distance away. I think in Texas, something like 25 feet. So don't approach them, and don't talk to the officer. Don't talk to the officer. I would say don't talk throughout the interaction. I'm not sure how this would play out in court. If you're talking, distracting the officer, unless you're telling someone to comply, hey, listen, man, put your hands behind your back. Stop fighting the cops. If you're saying those types of things, that's great. Officer, what's your badge number? And all this kind of stuff, that can be interfering, because my focus is on what's going on, and I got to watch this guy's hands, and now I got to worry about you and whose side. Right, so don't do that type of thing. Stay in the back and just tell them. And I've heard a lot of times videos of people saying in videos, "Don't worry, I got this whole interaction on tape. Got the whole thing on tape." That's great, and that will hopefully that type of language gets the people or gets the suspect to calm down. So that's what so that type of talk I would agree with. Stay a good distance away. They tell you don't come any closer. Don't come any closer. The officer doesn't know you, doesn't know your intentions. So stay at a fair distance. If you want to say anything, tell the person that we're getting it on tape, we got it on video, we'll see you down to the station, just comply, stop fighting with the cops, things along those lines. That would be my advice in those scenarios.
Okay, that's number 8. Number 9, be careful of the good cop, bad cop routine. Sometimes you see 2 officers show up, 2 detectives, and they do these a lot on sexual assault or aggravated assault or murder charges. They'll show up and they'll have 2 different officers, 2 different detectives. One of them will come at you real hard, right? Trying to make you feel like they're going to bully you. The other one will come and act like they're your friend. Please understand, just like you've seen this on the movies, this is a routine. They're coming to try to earn your trust, and the good cop's trying to act like he's protecting you from the bad cop, and that the 2 of you are going to be good buddies and he's going to help you out so that you don't end up in a bad spot. That is a lie. It is a routine. It is an absolute sham in order to have you try to trust an officer to talk about information that, quite frankly, could be twisted or manipulated to appear to be a confession. So be careful of that tactic, all right? Finally, number 10, you have the right to look at a search warrant. Let's say an officer comes to your house and they claim they're there with a search warrant to search your house. You have the right to review the search warrant, and then you have the right to refuse consent to search anything that is not expressly provided for in that search warrant. This is really important, because what will happen is many times if an officer shows up at your house and he's got a search warrant, what are they going to do? You just get out of the way and the officers ransack the entire house, and many times they will go beyond the scope of the actual search warrant. So the best way to make sure and protect yourself in that situation is that you review the search warrant, you only allow them to search what is within the search warrant, and if it's not in the search warrant, you refuse consent. Otherwise, they have the right, they are going to have the ability to continue to search, and they'll go beyond the scope of what that search warrant provided. In fact, if you have consented to a search and then the officer if he comes in there and damages your property, here's one thing people don't realize. If the officer goes in there and damages your property after you've given consent, there's very little chance you're going to have to be able to hold them liable for all the damage that they caused to your property. Never consent to the search. Now listen, protect yourself from being tricked. You have a Fifth Amendment right to be quiet. Don't open your mouth. You have a Sixth Amendment right to counsel, to protect yourself. You need to know your rights, stand on those rights. Don't get tricked by the police.
So this was fairly decent. He did a fairly decent job. Not too much I'm going to disagree with. Some of the tricks up there are used and will continue to be used because they're effective. Here's what I want. Here's the biggest takeaway that I would say is he gave you his takeaway, Fifth and Sixth Amendments. Okay, great. You know, we should all exercise them. I'm in retirement now. I got to know mine as well, right? I would say talk to your kids, talk to your loved ones, let them know, when to be quiet, when to talk to the police, give them good counsel, good advice before they get in the car with people they don't know. Tell them to know who they're dealing with, what's going on. If you don't have anything to, another item I would say is you don't have anything to fear. You shouldn't have to fear them saying, we got your DNA, etc., fingerprints, hair follicles, whatever, on scene. Especially if you were there before, you might have an explanation, but you might want to wait to have a lawyer explain it for you rather than talking. The whole consent thing, you don't have to give consent, and that goes for phones, your apartment, and things like that. So he did a fairly decent job. Can't say too much about him. Let me know your thoughts, your opinions. Actually, I want to read through a couple of these comments here. I was a cop for over 24 years, retired as police chief. Listen to this fellow. He knows what's going on. Never, ever talk with the police. It is not in your best interest. 56 replies to that. There are only 3 things you should say to the police. I don't answer questions. I do not consent to any search or seizures. I want a lawyer. Yeah, that's not these types of things. I guess I will consent. I concede to those. I would just say we stick with 2. I don't consent to any searches or seizures, and I want a lawyer, right? Maybe, yeah, okay, I'll give him that, right? You have the right to remain silent. Just do it. When and who decided the police can lie to people when questioning a subject? This should be brought to an end. When and who was the Supreme Court using deception? I don't know the case off the top of my head. Maybe I'll look it up before I post this, but there was a case law that said the police can use deceptive practices. I personally am not in favor of it. I think it makes us look bad as a profession. But there's others who are police officers who are going to say, listen, this is how we get confessions, and this is the techniques, these are the tactics, and they work, and we get confessions. Without them, it'd be hard for us to get it. And some of that I hear, but the other side of that is, it makes us look bad as a profession when we're lying to people. It just does. It just does. Particularly when we're doing it on the street level stuff, right? Because there's really kind of street level kind of conversations that we have with people. And then there's the interrogation or interview room where we're having a different conversation, right? So I can see in an interview and interrogation room, you want to waive your right to want to have a conversation. Okay, let's have a conversation, right? And so it can be served in the best interest of the police officers then. So I find it odd that a cop can lie during an interrogation, but the suspect cannot. They can, and they do all the time. It's illegal. It's illegal to lie to an FBI agent. It's illegal to lie in Congress. It's illegal to lie in a court of law. But you're talking to a police officer, it's not illegal. Go figure. So aren't we all government agents? So it's not. People do it all the time. No one's ever been charged with lying. Or at least I'm not aware of any statute for lying to a police officer. I hate the way cops do things. I had a choking type of incident and passed out while driving 70 miles per hour above the speed limit. I went, through a guardrail and into a ravine and hit a tree head on. Is this long? I got out of my truck all days. Guess someone saw it on the highway, called 911. I was walking up the hill on my own power, and probably 30 feet away when the cop says, I smell alcohol. How much did you have to drink? I didn't say anything because the EMTs were there. The cop is trying to make me take a breathalyzer when I couldn't breathe good. EMT told the cop we are taking him. I ended up going to our local hospital, but then transferred to UPMC trauma unit. I had 10 broken ribs, punctured lung, and punctured spleen. The cop just wanted a check mark on his record. He didn't help me out at all. And yes, I was sober. If you say so, buddy. Okay. And sometimes, it can be emanating through your pores and, wind conditions and all that kind of stuff. So, maybe something through the car or whatever, I don't know. So I'm not going to read all those, but that was pretty good. And I want to do another one here. I'm going to do another one of his in a second here. So stay tuned for that one.